Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of kleptocracy, that is where the elites, the wealth creating machinery of the whole economy is going downhill. So the elites are grabbing everything they can before the ship goes down and stuffing their own pockets full of loot. Now, there are quite a few people, the numbers increasing across the West that suggest that we're already at or close to full-on kleptocracy in the West. The standard of living for the Western citizen has fallen by, 2/3 to 3/4, assuming the average wage here. 2/3 to 3/4, the spending power has declined. Some young person or youngish, someone say mid-20s, come out of college is going to have a college debt that they may not pay off till they're 40. They're never going to have enough money to buy a house, even some shit box somewhere. Or they're never going to, be able to afford to sort of get married and support children and, this type of thing. So it's been a long time since this scenario or situation has existed in Western civilization. So, but at the same time, as the citizen is getting poorer and markedly so, the elites, and when I say the elites, could be the political class or the banking and financial class, are doing very, very well out of this. And politicians that 10 years ago had almost no real estate. Or 15 years ago had almost no real estate in a property portfolio, today have $15 or $20 million worth of property in a portfolio, and that's after a divorce as well, where they lost half their assets and so on. So there's a political class and again an elite class that are doing very well. Every well-paid job now, and I've mentioned this many times before, if I go on to say the job boards, the best paid jobs in Australia aren't private sector jobs. They're not, the startup company. They're not the hardworking. They're far from it. They're jobs. The best paying jobs are nearly all in NGOs, quangos, and the public service now. There are times when I look at them. I keep an eye on it. Keep a look at the best paid jobs. Most prestigious best paid jobs in the whole of Australia, and there may be not one job that's in the private sector. So. Cronyism is now, rampant, and ex-politicians, staffers of politicians are being routinely given, jobs. We're talking jobs of unproductive bullshit globalist type jobs, like $500,000 a year being paid to be the director of diversity at some bullshit college and things like that. Or $350,000 a year to be an advisor to a senior politician on gay lesbian affairs and so on. Grants are routinely handed out by the government to NGOs to enrich a small group of people. You look at the US aid thing in the United States, a vast US aid sort of system and the media thing there. All those jobs, very well paid, a lot of them, are gifted to well-known activists, who are former conga line, round robin from NGOs, round through the universities and the colleges into USAID and the public service and back around again. So they're recycling the most rabid activists who are being given and gifted very well-paid, prestigious jobs, but they're nothing. They're zero productivity jobs. They produce, create, and build nothing. Their whole purpose is to tear things down, not to create shit. So this kleptocracy idea is there are a lot of people. Well, a lot. There are a small group of people. It's not even 1 in 100, by the way, who are doing very, very well out of the demise of the West. And again, it's through buying shares in a horribly overinflated share market. People like Nancy Pelosi. The performance on her share portfolio is something like 17,000% appreciation. And these people have been given front row seats on insider trading. And there's a huge amount of insider trading and market rigging and fixing goes on in Wall Street. And same in real estate, there are politicians that'll buy a rundown house, and be gifted a interest-free loan that they may even not have to pay anything on from some sort of globalist financial institution. They buy the house for $1 million. Maybe they refurb it, and then a very cashed up money laundering Chinese investor is introduced by the same bank to the politician, and then the Chinese buyer buys it for $5 million. So the politicians has flipped the property in a couple of years and pocketed several $1 million in the process. So this is how they're able to increase their wealth substantially. Now they're doing this while at the same time knowing that the average citizen's living standard is dropping like a stone. And this is the definition of kleptocracy, knowing that everyone else is doing it tough, but while you can stuff money in your pockets. Now, the overall wealth creator, and I'll do a separate video on this, but there's various papers that come out, white papers, studies and this sort of thing, saying that the Western economies generally, and the Australian economy too, productivity is nosediving. And they pretend to be bewildered. Well, we don't know why it's happening, and obviously wages are too high. That's the problem. Yes, sure they are. Well, standards of living are dropping by 2/3 plus, but the wages are too high. I mean, give me a break. The issue is that the new jobs being of diversity and the advisor and gay lesbian and this and that thing, nearly all the new jobs being created are in the public service, quangos, NGOs, where productivity is about zero, if not minus. And so the drag on the total economy is that the productive jobs aren't being rewarded anywhere near how they used to be, and fewer of them exist. The majority of jobs now are daycare, doll's house jobs, or jobs, if they're well paid and prestigious, as zero productivity jobs, such as director of diversity, such as director of equality, and all these sorts of things. Again, these jobs are paid very, very well. There's a job in the university where, and it's only a 3-day-a-week job, where all the guy has to do, or whoever holds the job has to do, is rustle up, scare up a bunch of placard wavers at short notice to pretend to be protesting this or that, and that pays in benefits and so on. That pays $250,000 a year, and it's only a 3-day-a-week job. Those sort of jobs are everywhere now, again, in NGOs, in the education establishment and so on. And job creation schemes, as in fake, phantom bullshit jobs, particularly in the public service, are just exploding. All these Indians and so on that are being brought into Australia by the gazillion, they're walking straight into public service jobs. Barely an interview, if they're just walking straight in the door. And you can see a local government council that was 98% white 10 years ago is now about 20% white. All the jobs have gone to all this mass immigration people, but these are all they created low productivity jobs. And because merit has been pretty much dispensed with and disregarded, high productivity people have been replaced with low productivity people. So all across the board, things are going downhill. But the elites, the people in the financial class, the politicians, the senior public service, they've immunized themselves against this, because it would have dragged them down as well. So that sort of pain and suffering's for the masses, not for us. And so politicians, whether it be in the United States or Australia or anywhere around the West, have these very substantial property portfolios. They're incredibly canny in the property. They somehow manage to magically find these seriously undervalued property assets, and then when they sell them to the highest possible price imaginable. So I mean, is that market forces? Well, of course it's not. It's a rigged market for these people where they can increase their own wealth while they watch the rest of the populace doing it tough. Now, this is, I would argue that the possible, if not probable, definition of a kleptocracy, where the elite class is stealing everything they fucking can lay their hands on while everyone else gets poorer. Now, I've seen this mentality, this sentiment. I've seen, quite some years ago now, I was brought in as an accidental candidate to some extent. The various factions in this company all neutralised each other and each other's candidate. But the company had been doing well and now was doing badly. And the bigger ticket investors were concerned and they wanted something done about it. But what the remedy should be, no one could agree, and there are various factions on the board of directors and so on, and no one could agree on whose candidate should be the one. So they chose, if you like, the neutral candidate, which happened to be me. No, not that anyone supported me getting this job, but no one opposed it, and so I could have got in by default. So the company's doing badly, losing a lot of money, and it wasn't going to last much longer. And everyone kind of knew that. All the managerial class in this company, they all figured that it only had months to go, and then it would just sort of roll over, turn up its toes, and die. And that was really the sentiment. And no one really thought that I had anything, that there was a chance anyway, or that I had a chance of turning things around. But I went at it with determination and gusto, and did in the end succeed, by the way. But the issue was when I looked at all the managerial staff, they were madly stuffing their pockets with goodies. They would organise trips away on Friday to exotic locations, claiming that there were key customers there, and then they would stay the weekend, at some luxury hotel, beachfront hotel, and they would burn, thousands of dollars doing this, and no one was checking. There was and all sorts of fraud like this was going on. People would sign out computers to their home because they wanted to work from home for a few days, but the computer would never come back. And in those days, like a tricked up computer, a 386 chip, by the way, could be worth $15,000 with all the bells and whistles on it. So things were just disappearing, and again, one guy was the expense accounts that people had were just off the charts. I'd never seen expense accounts that generous, and one guy, his wife had some multi-level marketing clothing thing, and she would hire out a suite at one of the swankiest hotels downtown, have it fully catered with food and drink, and we get women to come in, and then she would also hire models to model the clothing and then put it on the husband's expense account, and he would come in and just say, yeah, pay this, and it would be thousands of dollars, and she'd do that once a month, and made a lot of money out of it. And other people had arranged to get these tax-free loans to go buy property and then refurb them. So they'd buy a rundown property and borrow $100,000 from the company to do that, or however much, back in the day, to refurb and renovate and remodel some property they'd got, and then sell it at some huge profit, then just pay back the $100,000. But they've got no interest, or they haven't had to pay fees or anything. So as a way to get free money to enrich themselves, and this sort of thing was going on. It's why everybody's at it, and that and 100 other sort of scams and schemes they were involved in. And somehow the executive level, the board and the CEO, had just lost touch with that. Some of this was, they would say, well, look, these guys, I remember the first meeting with the CEO, and I pointed out, and I had then got all of it, but I pointed out the extent of the fraud and the scams and so on. And he I remember he sort of leaned back and he said, yeah, but these people, I've known them since I was a kid. I went to school with a lot of them, and a lot of them are friends of my father and my family, and a lot of them share my views on the world, and share my views on what's right and wrong. And it's just, so given we're all girls together, then do we really need to worry too much about this? And he conceded that the biggest stuff, the real big ticket rip-offs, sure, he did agree that needed to be dealt with, but he didn't want anyone fired because they're kind of friends of mine. And this was part of the issue. But coming back to say something like USAID, Well, we all share the same view that straight white male Christians are evil, fascist, Nazi, Hitler, swastika waving fucking bigot bastards. And because we all share that view, then we should all be giving good jobs to each other and looking out for each other. But these people are unemployable, moronic fuckwits. Oh, that doesn't matter. They share my views. We don't want to give the jobs to Nazis, so we have to get, and this sort of thing. So he had that wider mind. This is the CEO, the wider mindset. So now I started dealing with the biggest issues, the biggest frauds. But that people would come into my office and say, look, okay, I accept that it's a bit over the top here, but the company's going to go bust anyway. Why should I go without goodies and loot for a company that's going to go toes up anyway? Why don't I steal whatever I can just before the ship goes under the waterline? And I was amazed at this attitude, and this is a kleptocracy attitude. Well, things are going to go to shit anyway, so I might as well just steal everything I can. No. And I believed the company could be turned around, but they not only were doubtful of that, but thought, well, who cares? Why should I bust a gut? Why should I live a life of uncertainty once turned around? And this type of thing. And this is the attitude I think is in the political class across the West now. Now we're screwed anyway. The globalists are looking out for us. If the whole thing comes crashing down, they'll give us a well-paid job in the UN, or we'll get a well-paid job in some NGO, so we'll be okay. And you can see this, by the way, with people that do get found out, in the political class or something, that you think they're getting fired or thrown to the wolves or thrown on the street, but they're out of work for 5 seconds, and some NGO is giving them another job. There was an NGO in the UK that was paying some former politician, some activist guy, $1 million a year salary just to be an activist, just to go do all the media interviews that, Nazis are everywhere and we got to stop them, that sort of stuff. And so he was fully funded by US aid, and so he lost the funding. The very next day, he was hired by another NGO who's got Soros funding or some other source of funding, also on $1 million a year. His wife was a well-paid NGO flunky. She lost money, lost all that through US aid funds being, cut off, and she too was hired another. So don't think these people are suffering. They're not. The globalists look after their hateful agitators and give them other, which is again part of the wider kleptocracy problem. But these people would come into my office and demand, say, well, why? Okay, all right then. So Billy Bob, you think you can turn the company around? Okay, fine. And they'd look at me with that look of, you poor little stupid moron. You think you can turn the company around? Well, why don't you just take away everyone else's benefits, scams, but not mine? I'll keep my benefits, and you take, that'll sort of sate your lust for solving the problems. And they genuinely couldn't see, like the guy who had his wife doing, like, hiring out luxury hotel suites to do her business and him claiming all those expenses. He couldn't see the problem. Why can't I do it? Why not? And when people have that mentality, and he's part of an elite mentality that, okay, other people will suffer. All right, fine. I don't care. I don't want to suffer. I don't see why I should suffer. And so they want to claim all this money and scam expense accounts and so on. So I cut all that stuff out and made the hard decisions against, by the way, serious and determined opposition. Quite high stress levels actually doing that. But sometimes I would question, why am I doing this? Why am I going through this sort of stress when all it is heartache? Similarly, a meeting with the board of directors, which again, if we talk about the political class and their attitudes and behaviour, when I have to front the board of directors, for the monthly meeting, which they changed to a weekly meeting, by the way, during this time, I'd get beaten up about, well, what are you giving, Jimmy Jack a hard time for, or Billy Bob or Billy Jean? I said, what are you giving them a hard time? I went to school with that man's father, and my wife is godmother to that woman, and so on. You get all this sort of incestuous bullshit stuff. and they beat me up over it, or at least, to try and sort of harass me into changing course. Now, they would agree, no, look, we want the company to turn around. We know you have to make hard decisions. We agree on that, but just don't upset the people we like. But the whole place was full of people they liked. It was all relatives and friends and patronage and cronyism, and that's why the company was in trouble, by the way. It had started off with bright, capable, people that had taken it to high levels of success, but then they'd replaced them, when there was lots of money floating around. Hey, this is easy. We'll just stick all our buddies and relatives and so on in there. So that, and again, this is what I believe has happened. The globalists have, because they had to get rid of merit in order to implement their programs, the globalists, they just replaced competent people with incompetent people that would just do as they're told. Idiots and morons and flunkies, or sinister, shadowy people that subvert and corrupt and undermine and have no skills and abilities or intentions other than that. So I would question, sometimes I sit there and say, why the fuck am I busting my ass when not only am I getting endless shit all around me, but the board of directors is beating me up as well, that type of thing. But I stayed the course, and the company was in the end, the bleeding and the hemorrhaging stopped, and the company returned to profitability. So it was a success in that sense. But there were people there that never forgave me for that. I get calls from wives of people, how dare you, not let us steal money from the company? Don't you understand that this and that? I'm going to take the kids out of the private school, and they thought it was their absolute right to loot the whole ship as it was going down, and they couldn't see why that was a problem, and who would care? It's and as a number of people would say, well, it's not my money. Why should I care? And so, are we in a kleptocracy? I'll be interested in seeing the comments on this. You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.